Hi, hello everybody. How are you? We are here to read three more chapters of my fanfiction trilogy about Harry. As you noticed, I changed setting. Probably not the best considering I've got a window full of light behind me, but I had to do it because I'm trying to tackle the Wi Fi problem. So hopefully, I won't have any disconnection while we are doing this. We will see. I'm fiddling with wires and hopefully everything will go right. We will see again. So, yeah, about Harry, and by now, if you are following me, you know what's about. It's Harry Potter life as an adult. So, we understood many things in this chapter we read together, and well, I think we can carry on without any further ado. Just maybe I should mention again the disclaimer. So, all the characters in here, I didn't invent them. They are covered by copyright, which is not mine. I just use them for entertainment purpose without making any money out of it whatsoever. So, yeah, just gonna drink a bit since it's boiling hot outside. Hello, Marco. Okay, so chapter 10, Harry's past. Ginny had a troubled look. She held in her hand a scroll of paper. On the window, a screech owl was drinking from a bowl left there for it. He recognized Leo, George's owl. He could see by Ginny's expression that it wasn't good news. As soon as he approached her, she passed him the scroll. In a very untidy handwriting, it said, "Hello, guys. Ron is here, and I have a bit of a good bad news to relate. Let's start with the good. He came back without a struggle. I didn't have to cast the Incarcero spell I was more than ready to use in case he wasn't willing. He abandoned his plan to kidnap Rose and followed me without too much trouble. Now, for the bad. I'm writing locked in the bathroom. That probably will make you understand how things stand. He refuses categorically to see reason. He's still enraged against Harry, even if the violent mood subsided. He told me that the moment has come for us to decide who we want in our family, him or Harry. I told him he's behaving like a moron, but I didn't press the matter as he was getting angrier by the minute. I just managed to persuade him to sleep at my place tonight, but he's determined to go to the barrow tomorrow morning. I hope he will think about it all over again and he will be more reasonable after a night's sleep. But to be honest, I don't think he will. I've, I've never seen him like this. We will see. Don't reply to this, George. He gave back the scroll to Ginny. We didn't really expect anything different, did we? No, I guess not, she said with resignation. But I must say, I was ready to hope. She stood up and closed the window behind Leo, who was already flying away. I will prepare dinner in a minute. You go and relax, she said with a tired smile. Harry went to the living room, sat down in the armchair, and leaned against it, sighing. He felt disheartened. He brought his memory back to the Hogwarts days. He and Ron playing games in the back of the room during Bean's classes, playing Quidditch together, losing at chess against him, the snowballs fights in winter, the countless laughter. How did we get to this? Why all this will against him? Harry knew it couldn't just be because of what had happened with Hermione. As Ted had said, that one was just a drop. Well, looking at it from Ron's point of view, maybe it wasn't just a drop. It was more like a glass full of drops. Or maybe a pint. Okay, let's be honest with oneself. It's a fucking Niagara's Fall. Ron will never forgive me this. Even if only this unhappy episode had been under scrutiny, it would have already been a hopeless case. But on the top of it, there were years and years of resentment accumulated, all starting with his popularity back in school. Ron never fully understood that back then Harry would have swapped his life with Ron's any time given the chance. He was the lucky one, having a big family that loved him and was always there to side and support him. He realized now how he craved to be a part of that family when he was young. Although he never even dreamed to feel resentment against Ron for what he had, and he had not. He was just as he was. Why, then, has Ron always resented him? He couldn't explain it to himself. While following this train of thought, Lily entered the room. Sensing Harry's mood, she was lingering on the threshold undecided whether to come forward. He smiled at her, warily but encouragingly, so she climbed on his lap. She didn't speak. She just looked at him with her penetrating gaze. Are you sad, Dad? She finally said. Yeah, my pet, a bit. Because of Uncle? He nodded. She was silent again. Then, with her finger, she started tracing the contour of the scar on his forehead. What you doing? He asked, smiling. Mom explained to me why you have that scar. I asked you, but you never answered. What did she tell you? That she was better not to tell. She told me that you know who tried to kill you when you were a baby and he couldn't. That's why you have it, and that's why I've just got one grandma and one grandpa. She spoke in a low voice, a bit frightened by her own daring to speak about Voldemort. The tale of him still terrorized children and adults alike. I've got the same name as your mom, right? You do, he answered her question mechanically, still thinking about Ron. How was she? I never knew her. I was too young when she died. But I've seen pictures, and everybody says she was lovely, smart, and brave. She leaned her head on his chest, deep in meditation. So, who took care of you when you were little? My uncle and aunt, he said, passing his fingers in her dark red hair. She suddenly sat upright on his lap. I've got another aunt and uncle? Yes, you do, but I have no idea where they are now. And with any luck, you will probably never meet them. As a matter of fact, she had met them when she was 3 years old, but she had no way to know. It was during summer holidays. They had taken the kids to the London Aquarium. Harry had never been himself, and Ginny obviously neither. They were in front of the shark tank, and the boys had their noses pressing to it charmed. Harry was holding Lily and showing the fishes to her. As they were walking to the next tank, he saw them. They were coming from the opposite direction, taking by the hand a little boy who was about 6 years old and couldn't be any other than Dudley's son. He was just like him when he was a child, blonde, chubby, and scolding. His aunt and uncle were exactly as he remembered them, only with grayer hair and more wrinkles. They widened their eyes in surprise, gaping when their gaze met, and Harry knew that they recognized him too. They stared at each other only for a second, taking in all the changes, and then they averted their eyes almost at the same moment. There wasn't any reason to acknowledge each other. Neither there could be any pleasure in the meeting. Quite the opposite. Ginny was distracted by the endless flow of James and Albus' question and didn't notice anything. Harry wasn't sure she would have recognized them anyway. She hadn't had many occasions to see them. Harry didn't lighten her, however. There wasn't any point to it, and that meeting quite spoiled his day. It had been the only episode in 19 years. He hadn't heard or seen them again, and he wasn't sorry for it. For this reason, he wanted to crush as soon as possible any possible expectation from the quarterly Lily. But why? She looked at him a bit disappointed. They were never nice to me. Why they weren't nice to you? Interesting question. Why weren't nice to me? Envy? Stupidity? Pure evilness? All of them? Anyway, the answer he was tempted to give was because they were fucking bastards. However, the parental advice one was because they didn't approve of my parents and they had the son already. They liked him more than they liked me. They never treated me well. Lily's expression suddened. What did they do to you? Where to start? He remembered about the closet and the stairs, the second-hand clothes always too large for him, the humiliations, the neglect, Dudley bullying him, being locked in his room and almost starved. And then he looked at his daughter and read in her eyes the struggle in understanding a situation quite different from her own, and sadness and pity. He could see her picturing in her childish mind not to have had an imam and be mistreated. He didn't want this. He didn't want his own daughter to be confronted with the reality of his miserable childhood. He didn't want her to feel pity for him. He took her in his arms and stood up. We must go and help Mommy setting at the table. She didn't relinquish her question. What did they do to you? He didn't answer and took her to the kitchen. They had a subdued meal. Lily was playing with her food and not eating much, her expression grave. Harry regretted immediately having told her that much, little as he was. The following day, at 8 o'clock, Hermione was at their door. She brought Hugo over. Ginny had some schedule to plan, a job she could do from home, and had accepted to take care of him together with Lily. She welcomed him with her usual vivacity and took him by the hand straight away to show him the tree. They were as opposite in character as it was possible to be. He was a shy boy, reserved and quiet. But probably because of their difference, they never argued, and they loved each other dearly, always begging their parents to bring them over to play together. Harry kissed Ginny goodbye and started with Hermione for the ministry. There wasn't much snow around, just a white veil covering cars and tree branches. However, that little made the grey city look a bit more welcoming and festive. A few people were already around for a last minute Christmas shopping, or, like them, going to work. They had just one working day that week. The day after, the 24th, they would have had to go to St. Pancras to pick up the kids back from Hogwarts. They walked slowly. Hair was crispy, and the sun was starting to come out. It was going to be a nice sunny day, though cold. Why didn't you say anything to Jean about the Horcrux? Hermione asked abruptly, without as much as a preliminary sentence. He looked at her, frowning. Didn't we agree not to tell? To the world in general, yes, but to her, obviously I thought you let it out with her. I was very surprised in understanding that she didn't know anything of your connection with Voldemort. Why should I have told her? What was the point? He asked, feeling irritated. Harry, she is your wife. You are supposed to share both painful moments and the happy ones with her. There isn't any point in saddening her with what cannot be changed, he said brusquely. And then he reflected. He had an imbalance between the happy and the unhappy, and it was unfair to make Ginny even more aware of these than she already was. I disagree. You hurt her more being as reserved as you are than sharing with her what troubles you. Why all of a sudden the whole world wants to acknowledge me as reserved? It doesn't trouble me anymore. My past, I mean. She looked at him archly. Harry, don't give me that rubbish, please. If he wouldn't, you would speak about it. I see how you always avoid the topic whenever you can. He didn't answer, aware that she made a point. He could kid himself with thinking that it didn't matter anymore. But the past was always there, with him, whatever he did and wherever he went, never healed and never forgot. And your kids ask questions about you to me and to Ginny because they know that they cannot ask you. They are smart, they understand, they want to know about you from you, not from us, or worse, from strangers. He rubbed his hands together to keep them warm, struggling to find the words to express what he thought. Hermione, you don't understand. Only yesterday Lily asked me about my mom. I only told her that I never knew her and that I've been raised by my aunt and uncle that weren't nice to me. And you had to see her face. She looked half heartbroken thinking about me without a mom. And that is just the top of the iceberg. You saw Ginny's face when I told her Voldemort made me an Horcrux. How could I possibly find the heart to tell them more when just those notions pain them so much? He paused a second and then continued steady. I just want to forget myself. I'm not gonna dig everything up again and make my family miserable. I must deal with this alone. I'm sorry, Harry. I'll be honest with you now. She took Harry's hand and continued. You'll never forget. It doesn't matter how much effort you will put in it. You won't succeed. It is not something you can forget. You will have to live with it. Your family loves you and want to share that burden with you. They know it is painful, but they don't mind, otherwise, they wouldn't ask. What you are doing is keeping them far from you. And eventually, one day, all that you are harboring will come out in a very unpleasant way if you don't learn how to deal with it now. She looked at him with the corner of her eyes, afraid of his reaction at her criticism. They were almost at the entrance of the public toilet to get to the ministry. Harry was affected by Hermione's words. So affected, he forgot to be irritated by it. You have been honest indeed, he said as they entered the public toilet. She chuckled. You know I have to speak my mind. You are probably right, as usual, he smirked. But it's not easy. I know it's not. It rarely is. She squeezed his hand sympathetically. She gave him a kiss and disappeared into the cubicle. In the early afternoon, an inter-department memo flew into his office. I'm going to the borough to meet Ron. I heard from Molly. He's there. I'll write to you as soon as I can. Love, Hermione. For the rest of the afternoon, he found it difficult to concentrate. Conjecture of the result of that encounter uppermost in his mind. The hope that she could fix everything was strong. He exchanged Christmas wishes with his colleagues and started for home earlier than usual in trepidation, anxious for an update. Hugo was still there. He could hear him playing with Lily in the living room. It didn't bode well. As he entered the kitchen looking for Ginny, his assumption ended up being correct. He found her exactly in the same posture and with the same expression of the previous day. A scroll of parchment close to her on the table. Why do I feel I'm getting a deja vu? He asked, getting the parchment and caressing her head gently while reading. Dear Ginevra, Ron is here. He arrived this morning in a most unpleasant mood. He told us what happened, exaggerating everything as you can well imagine. He demanded from us to sever our contacts with Harry. I told him he can't ask this from us, since in our affection they are both our sons. He wasn't happy about it. He said nasty things I don't want to write and got very angry indeed. It seems he's harboring the conviction that the whole family values Harry more than him, which is absolutely not true. We love him very much. We just don't want our family to be split up. It pains me. It's happening all just before Christmas. and on the eve of the children returning home. I asked Hermione to come and try to speak to him. They have been closed in the living room for already some time. I hope she will succeed where we failed. A lot of love to you, Harry and Lily, from me and your dad. Your affectionate Mom. He let the letter drop on the table. I guess we need to decide what to do tomorrow. Do you think I should come to St. Pancras? She took a quizzical look. Of course you must. James and Doubles will be dreadfully disappointed if you don't. What if Ron will be there? She looked at him, understanding the meaning of the question, and didn't answer. She took the letter and read it again. We will ask Hermione what to do. So, this was the end of chapter 10. I'll drink some water, as usual. And I guess we can start straight away with chapter 11. Okay. Chapter 11. What do we do on Christmas Day? The morning of the 24th at 7 o'clock, they were woken up by Lily. She sprinted in the room and jumped on the bed between them. Wake up! She shouted. We need to go to pick James and Albus up! Lily, it is not until 1 o'clock, Ginny mumbled, turning on the other side under the duvet. I know, but we have to make the house look pretty and cook something nice for dinner. Why don't you start, and we will follow up? Suggested Harry, hoping against hope she would let them sleep at least 1 hour more. Surprisingly, she was so excited she agreed instantly and ran out to the kitchen. They heard their steps down the stairs and the crash after a few minutes. You know she's going to demolish the house if we let her alone. Ginny's voice came from somewhere under the duvet. Let's leave her run amok. We will have James and Albus tonight anyway. It's gonna happen. We cannot stop it. Harry answered, ready to fall asleep again. Harry, please, go and check on her. I feel so tired. He groaned, disgruntled, but sat up, trying to gather the energy. Thank you. You are the best husband in the world. Yeah. Up to yesterday I was messy and careless. He yawned and went out to see what Lily had managed to do in the space of 5 minutes. It turned out to be quite a lot, not surprisingly. She was floating on a stool trying to get the flour from an upper shelf. On the floor were already 2 pots smashed and sugar everywhere. He took the flour with one hand and Lily around the waist with the other arm. She started laughing as she was released safe on a chair. He went to get his wand. Reparo, he murmured sleepily, and the jars were whole and full again. So, what were you trying to do? I want to make biscuits. All right. He had never done it, but how difficult could it be? He got a recipe book from the shelf and started to study. Mysterious spells and ingredients he never heard of were written on the page. Lily was looking at him expectantly. He shut the book. Right. What if we wait Mommy for this? We can have breakfast and then we clean the house. She agreed cheerfully. Harry made a simple breakfast of toast more adapted to his cooking skills, and then they proceeded around the house, tidying up and cleaning. Harry casting all the spells, and Lily copying him with her toy wand that had no effect whatsoever, if not emitting some colorful sparks. She was, however, well satisfied with it. At 10 o'clock, he went to check on Ginny. Are you okay? He asked, caressing her, finding her still in bed. I feel loosey and so tired, she answered. Her face was indeed pale. This run thingy is starting to worry me very much. I don't want my family to split up. The night before, Hermione got to their place quite late to pick Hugo up. She was dejected and weary. She told them how difficult speaking with Ron had been. At first, he didn't even want to see her. She asked him if he wanted to get a separation, but he didn't give a proper answer, and at first, he seemed inclined to want to take the kids with him there at the Burrow. However, on that point, she had been adamant. He obviously wasn't in the right state of mind to take care of them, and in the end, he agreed to leave them to her for the time being, while they would decide on what to do. She concluded saying, "He is determined to go and pick up Rose alone. He will take her to us, and with an excuse, he will return to the Burrow. I couldn't deny that to him. You know how close they are. I'm sorry, Harry, but as things are standing right now, I strongly advise not to go. And only God knows what's gonna happen on Christmas Day." Resentment had started to grow in him against Ron. What did he think he could accomplish with this behavior? He asked himself. Even in the unlikely case that the whole family decided to side with him and to alienate Harry from their life, would he be satisfied in making Ginny, the kids, and in consequence Molly and Arthur miserable for his sake? Was it that was it that selfish? Why does he want to split the family up so much? And the answer came as he was formulating the question. Because he knows how much I value it. He doesn't care how many people will suffer to achieve this. And the deepness of Ron's hatred scared him. Do I deserve this? He had always tried to do his best as a friend to pay up the debt he felt toward him. Ron had been the best of mates when he most needed it. He refused to think this could not be mended. He was just too fresh. Give it some more days and everything will be solved. And then I will just have to decide how long I will need to forgive him. He tried to reassure Ginny with this idea. I will fix this. I promise. When his anger will subside, I'll try to speak to him. He cannot hold it forever. Come down now. I will prepare some sandwiches. Lily would like to make biscuits for the boys. I tried, and it was beyond me. She giggled as she tried to shake away the bad feeling. You can produce a Patronus and you cannot make biscuits? She said, rising from the bed. Well, it took me some time to learn, and Lupin was a good teacher. You cannot expect me to achieve biscuits just like that at the first try. At 20 to 1, Ginny and Lily were ready to go. They told Lily Harry would stay behind wrapping presents. Only an excuse of that kind could make amends at his not going. He felt bitter in having to stay behind, however. How long was it going to last? The two families were so linked together, it was impossible for Harry and Ron not to encounter sooner or later. And it was probably going to be sooner, Harry realized with dismay. The following day was Christmas. The whole family was invited to Shell's cottage, together with all the other Weasleys, Ted and Andromeda. To accommodate everybody, Bill and Fleur had built a big shelter in the garden, protected by magic against wind and cold. Hermione was going to cast many of those blue fires she was so good to produce to be hanged all around in jars, and they were going to have a bonfire in the middle. All the children were overexcited about it. Lily, every morning, crossed out a day in her calendar, and James and Albus mentioned it in almost every letter since the plan had been explained to them. They could not miss it, and obviously Ron couldn't miss it either. Would Ron be able to overlook what was happening just for the day? By the sound of it, Harry was obliged to acknowledge that the answer was no. Not even an hour later, he heard the door, and the boys were there. They ran to hug him, something they would never have done at the platform with their friends looking. They were overjoyed to be at home. Albus was all excited to show him all his Gryffindor garments and to tell all the things he learned. James couldn't speak fast enough about the journey, the snow, and all that he and his friends said and did. And Lily was jumping around them, delighted to have her big brothers at home and to hear about Hogwarts. They had a very pleasant afternoon, hearing and talking, and a lovely dinner afterward. The boys seemed to have endless energy. After dinner, James took the lead of the two young ones, and they went to the living room to play before going to bed. Harry seized the opportunity to talk to Ginny about the morrow. "What do we do?" he asked solemnly. They were washing dishes together. They liked to do it by hand time to time. It gave them the chance to chat about the day. "We could stay here, I guess," she said grudgingly. "You go and tell the kids, though. I'm sure they'll take it well." At that moment, Albus ran into the kitchen in a frenzy, his face glowing with excitement. "Mom, James said we could bring marshmallow tomorrow and cook on the bonfire. It is the coolest idea. Do we have any?" Harry looked at Ginny meaningfully, trying to suppress a smile. She purposely avoided to meet his gaze and answered Albus. "Yes, sweetheart, we have some, but I'm not going to tell you where, otherwise, I'm sure we'll run out before tomorrow." He gave her a mischievous smile and ran back in the living room to share the news with the others. "You were saying?" asked Harry, smirking. She shrugged her shoulders and gave a little laugh. "Okay, so what do you think we should do?" she asked playfully. "We? Nothing. You go with the kids and I'll stay here." It was a big sacrifice, and it was done reluctantly, but he couldn't see any other option. She looked at him, arching an eyebrow. "That is out of the question. You aren't staying here alone for Christmas. Either we all go, or we don't go at all." "If Ron will be there, it won't be nice. I don't want to ruin everybody's Christmas." She started to get upset. "You are not ruining anybody's Christmas. It is Ron, if we want to find faults, who is ruining everybody's Christmas. You shouldn't be driven away by him." How was it? How was he at the platform? Was he there?" She sighed. "Yes, he was. But we didn't talk. The kids were there, and I could see he wasn't friendly toward me. He knows by now I choose you, to say it in his words. We just exchange formalities, and I think Rose suspects something." She finished rinsing the last plate, giving it to Harry to dry. "But I don't think he's going to make a scene in front of everybody. Probably will just ignore you, and that will be the end of it." He didn't answer. He'd like to think it was true, but something in him was inclined to suspect the opposite. "We could ask Molly's opinion. She's there. She must know what we better do." She reflected on it. "We could, but I don't know how to do it without him realizing it. I should think she would notify us if we better not go, though. She wouldn't leave it unsaid." She had a troubled expression, and she was still a bit pale. "How do you feel?" he asked, taking her in his arms. She shrugged her shoulders. "It's okay. I'm just worried. That's all." "It's going to be over soon. Don't worry too much about it." She nodded and rested her head on his shoulder. At that moment, Lily ran into the room, if possible, even more excited than Albus. "Mom, James wants to build a tent in the living room and sleep all together in it tonight. Can we?" "Yes, you can. Take all the pillows and duvets from your beds, though, not from ours." She emitted a shrill of pure joy. and ran back to the living room. And this was the end of chapter 11. So, sip of water, and I guess we can carry on for the last chapter of the evening, which is chapter 12, present opening. And here we get to Christmas in Harry Potter's life. Yay! Okay. The next morning, as it was predictable, they had all the kids by sunrise in their bed, shaking them and begging them to hurry down for presents opening. As soon as they got to the living room, they assaulted the tree, avidly grasping the boxes, and in a second, papers and balls were flying everywhere, shouts of joy echoing all around. Every Christmas, they always got more presents than they could count, having so many uncles and aunts. But they were always very eager for George one, a box each containing all the new shop's merchandise not yet on the market. Hermione's were usually a muggle present to stimulate logic. She always expressed the opinion that in the magical world it was by far too underestimated. When Lily opened Bill and Fleur presents, a candy pink tutu, she became wild to put it on straight away. She dragged Ginny away to her room, and Harry took the chance immediately to speak to the boys alone. He called their attention from gift opening and gave them a parcel each, who received them full of interest, saying, I was waiting for you being buff at Hogwarts to give you these. They are things I got when I was at school. They were my father's, and I found them extremely useful in my school days. I hope you will use them well. As James, who had been faster, opened his package, his old invisibility cloak, light as a feather, slid on the floor. It was still in perfect condition, as silvery and gleaming as when Harry got it 25 years previously. James gasped. Is it? It seems like. Is it really? Spluttered with wonder, not believing his eyes. Harry laughed at his amazement. Yes, it's an invisibility cloak. Try it on. As James threw it over himself, he disappeared completely from their sight. It's amazing, Albus whispered, awestruck, on his side, reaching out to touch it reverentially. This is so cool! They heard James shouting from under it. He pulled it off, and they scrutinized it mesmerized. Then Albus remembered he was still grasping his parcel, thin and smaller. He opened it in half a second, full of expectancy. James, seeing appearing what she thought was just a bit of old parchment, seemed disappointed. But Albus wasn't fooled by appearance. What is it? He asked Kin. Harry took the wand from his pocket and tapped on it, saying, I solemnly swear that I'm up to no good. On the parchment, after the introduction sentence, appeared an Hogwarts map. A few dots were on it. Most of the students were home for the holidays, but they could see all the teachers in their offices and students in the different common rooms. James and Albus' mouth fell open. Harry tapped again on it. Mischief managed. The map returned to be a common piece of parchment. They slowly raised their head, looking at Harry, still speechless with wonder. Harry was very amused by their expression, but added sternly, You will use them together. Without arguing, you should keep them as secret as much as possible, and when you, James, will leave Hogwarts, you give the cloak to Lily. All right? They nodded, still incredulous at the world of possibility that was opening in front of them. Go and hide them in your room. I'm not sure your mama would approve of this. Oh, I'm sorry. Obviously, Ricky wants to have his part. Okay. James darted away in a second, surely to try it on again in front of a mirror. But Albus stayed behind, looking at Harry, clearing wanting to speak to him in private but not knowing how to start. Is there something you need to tell me? Harry asked encouragingly. He nodded and went to sit close to him. He started to speak slowly, hesitantly, looking at his knees. Dad, people at school talked behind my back. What do you mean? Asked Harry quizzical. When I pass by in the corridor, people point at me and whisper, or sometimes in the common room, I see people talking and they stop abruptly when they see me. They did it with James too at the beginning, he told me. They treat us differently. They all want to be our friends. Harry started to understand. What happened to James in his fourth year was happening to Albus now. Is it because of you? Albus asked innocently, looking at him. Harry sighed. I'm afraid so. James told me to ignore it, but I can see he likes it. I don't know. I would like them to stop. I don't like it. I want them to treat me like everybody else. It was amazing, Harry thought, how James reminded him a lot of his father as he saw him in Snape's memory so many years before. He was boisterous and attention seeking. He had a group of friends to whom he was very attached, and they were growing to be much admired in general by the younger one. He found out all of this from Neville, who was always keeping an eye on them. Harry wasn't at all surprised he enjoyed the popularity so much. Albus, on the other side, was more introverted and solitary, enjoying the company mostly of Rose. He preferred staying in the shadow and didn't cope well with popularity. He was reminded of him when he was his age. He put an arm around his shoulders. I understand. But, you see, James is right. Unfortunately, you cannot change it. It's only because you just got there. It will stop eventually, or at least it won't be as bad as now. Just ignore it. He had told a little lie there. If it was as it had been for him, it would never stop. But it was best not to tell. He had the next 6.5 years to find out. How can I know if somebody wants to be friends with me for real? Or because of you? There wasn't any accusation in his voice, but Harry, nevertheless, felt a pang of guilt and pity for Albus, and he struggled to deal with his popularity. You will understand. It was the same for me when I got to Hogwarts. He remembered he remembered about Drago's outstretched hand toward him, offering an opportunistic friendship, and of Ron. And for the 100th time in 3 days, he asked himself, how in the hell did we get to this? But he cast out a thought to answer Albus. You will be able to see the intention behind the request of friendship. Was it difficult for you too? He asked eager. Yes, it was, but I've been lucky. I met Hermione and Ron, and you are even luckier than I was because you already got Rose. He squeezed him gently, trying to reassure him. Somebody told me you won a three-wizard tournament when you were in school. You never told me that. Why? Here we go again. But willing to give Hermione's advice a try, he started to recount, slowly weighing every word. I've never told you because it was neither pleasant nor fair. There was another guy competing, and he was older and better than me. He deserved to win, not me. A dark wizard smoothed my path to allow me to get to the cup first, but we touched it together. And because of it, Cedric died. Albus widened his eyes. Why? He asked in a small voice. The cup was a porky and brought us to Voldemort. Cedric has been killed because they didn't want him there. He stood up and went to the fireplace, looking at the flame, feeling uneasy. Am I right telling this to an 11-year-old boy? Albus, following him with his gaze, startled at the mention of the name, all wrapped up in awe and interest. What happened then? He asked again, mesmerized. Harry let his gaze fall on him and saw a boy, so young still, his eager green eyes, so similar to his own, on him. He was the same age when he met Voldemort the first time. He didn't feel a child then, but, as a matter of fact, he was still one. He remembered how keen he was to be told the whole truth, and how Dumbledore considered him too young to know for many years yet. He had been very much angered by it. He had thought it unfair. He had felt old enough. But now he was seeing everything from the other side, from an adult's point of view, and he realized that Dumbledore had been right. He was young. Albus was young. Too young. He felt a tinge on his forearm, where his blood was taken to give Voldemort a body again. The scar was still there, reminding him of it. How could he explain Voldemort's resurrection to a child? James would get nightmares for weeks. Harry actually had them for years, and such horrific nightmares they were. If he, who was 35, still felt distress recollecting those moments, what could be the reaction of a child? That couldn't possibly be a good topic for conversation, no matter what Hermione's views were on that point. He was saved from giving an explanation by Lily, returning all exuberant with her tutu to show the whole family, and James ready to open the last presents left. He took his chance. He complimented Lily warmly and vacated the room soon after. He felt James' gaze following him. He went to look for Ginny. It was already 10 o'clock, and the lady still to decide in regards of Shile Cottage. She was in the bathroom, in a corner, weeping, her eyes red and puffy. Alarmed, he kneeled beside her. What's the matter? He asked, caressing her head tenderly. I'm worrying sick with this Ron situation. What if we go there today and he reacts the same as 3 days ago in front of the kids? It is too hazardous, she said, drying her eyes with her handkerchief. It was odd for her to get so emotional. Usually, she was very tough. He hugged her, moved by her disquiet over a situation that she had contributed in creating. It is not the end of the world, he said consolingly. We won't go. I'll tell the kids. We will stay here. It doesn't matter, he added resolute. She nodded, mopping up her eyes. Tell them I don't feel well, she said as she stood up and made for the bed. Harry went back downstairs steadfast. He was going to be tricky. He was sure to give them a big disappointment, and the possible argument was waiting for him. But Ginny was right. It was better not to go. It wasn't worth the risk. Once in the living room, he raised his voice to be heard on the loud chatting. Children, I need to tell you something important. I'm not a child, cried James, indignant. Me neither, followed Albus. And me neither, repeated Lily, in imitation of her brothers, with all her 6 ears depicted on a very serious face. They all looked at her for a second, disoriented. But before they could start to argue, Harry announced, We are not going to the bonfire today. Your mom is not well. Silence followed this announcement. James dropped the firecracker he was holding. Lily started to whimper silently. I'm sorry. Silence followed his announcement. Albus dropped the firecracker he was holding. Lily started to whimper silently, and James let himself drop mutinously on the sofa with his arms crossed tightly. I knew it. How could you possibly know? Your mom started feeling sick only 5 minutes ago, asked Harry, ready for the oncoming row. James was always the most difficult one to deal with. We know about Uncle. We are not stupid, you know. That was a bit unexpected to Harry. How do you know? Lily told us. Lily jumped up, crying and shouting, I just told them you had a big argument. I didn't tell them anything more, I promise. She looked at her imploring, flooded with tears, and he knew she was referring to her promise to Ted not to repeating what she heard. And anyway, even if she hadn't, what do you think? We haven't got any eyes? Continued James with a sour look. Watch your tone, warned Harry sternly. But James continued with the same tone, purple in the face. Aunt Hermione and you weren't on the platform, and Mum and Uncle barely exchanged two words together. Anybody could see it was trained. You are telling a lie, he finished accusingly. Do not dare accuse your father of lying, he replied, getting warm. Surely for his disrespectful tone, but probably also because he had been caught in doing just that. You can go upstairs and check on your mother if you don't believe me. It is also true that we had a fight with Ron, and we didn't make up yet. As it is unwise for us to go. This is so unfair, James shouted, full of resentment. Get used to it, Harry replied, hoping to close the argument. But Albus started pleading. Couldn't you just try to make up? No, Albus. We've been trying for a few days. He doesn't want to talk to me, he said with finality. It is with you, not with us, that he has got a quarrel. Why can't we go? James said with animosity. Lily, still crying her eyes out, looked at his brother in anger. This is not very nice to say. If that won't go, I won't go. Please, Lily, never grow up. Just stay as lovable as you are forever. He picked her up, trying to calm her tears, and while mastering himself to answer James composedly, Ginny appeared on his side. I think I feel better, and we can go, I dare say, she said. Although, before they could start in jubilation, she turned to James with her proving look. If, and only if, I hear a felt apology from you, James. You have been rude and unfeeling. You called your dad a liar when I was indeed sick, and Christmas is a time for family. You should learn from your sister, she concluded stern. James, subtly, turned white under the reproach, and then quickly red with embarrassment. I'm sorry, Dad, he said, moving his stunted gaze swiftly from him to his slippers, probably fearing another rebuke. It's all right. I know you didn't mean it, Harry answered, softened, slightly amused by his abrupt change of tone. He let Lily down. Her tears had dried up completely the second Ginny said they would have gone. They resumed cheering and talking again animatedly. Albus gathered his firecracker from the floor and exploded it. A purple witch heart appeared together with some flowers. Lily thrilled enthusiastically and grabbed it from under Albus' disappointed nose. James grasped greedily a big box containing a mountain of chocolate frogs, and in 10 seconds he had already unwrapped half of them to get all the cards inside. He heard him exclaiming, disappointed toward him. Dad, I found another one of you again. I've already got four. Harry didn't answer, as he was taking the chance to whisper to Ginny. Are you sure you want to do this? She nodded. I thought we can just go and check on the situation. If Ron is not there, we can stay. But if he is, before he starts to argue, we leave the kids to Mom, and we get back here. We'll spend Christmas together, me and you. It'll be nice. And the kids won't miss the day. I'm sure when they see the bonfire, they will completely forget about us, she chuckled. He smiled and stroked her hair. I'm a very lucky man, he said. I know, she answered playfully. Okay, so that one was the end of chapter 12. I hope you enjoyed. I know I made many mistakes of pronunciation. Bear with me. Sometimes it comes out better, sometimes it comes out quite like horrible, like today. But well, this is how it is. And yeah, and next week I should probably warn you that the tone of the book is going to change completely. So up to now it has been kind of cheerful and I don't know, funny, but from the next week it's gonna change. So I remind everybody that yeah, I will put an age limit because it's not for kids. I mean, it's nothing exaggerate, nothing like too gruesome, but it's still, I mean, not very nice. So yeah, so I guess that's all for tonight, and I hope to see you the next week. Good night.